let's go on to the team that had the number one overall pick. It wasn't the worst in their division because they traded for it. And that is the Carolina Panthers. They went 7-10 last year. Fired head coach Matt Rule midway through the season. Also let go of interim head coach Steve Wilkes after he filled in after Rule left or was fired. And they also let go of quarterbacks Sam Darnold and PJ Walker, as well as running back Deontay Foreman, who filled in for them. Also center Pat Elflein. And then on the defensive side of the ball, lost defensive lineman Matthew Ioannidis and linebacker Corey Littleton. In terms of additions, they brought in head coach Frank Reich from the Indianapolis Colts, quarterback Andy Dalton, running back Miles Sanders, wide receiver Adam Thielen from the Vikings, wide receiver DJ Chark, tight end Hayden Hurst, who had a pretty good year with the Bengals last year, guard Justin McCray, and safety Von Bell, also from the Bengals, who's been pretty good. And then, as mentioned in the draft, they traded up from the number one overall pick and grabbed quarterback Bryce Young. And then, I forgot why, just annoyed me. Departure-wise, they also lost wide receiver DJ Moore. Forgot to add that. The site I was using didn't include trades. Obviously, big loss there. Best up. And then, fittingly, though, in the second round, they grabbed wide receiver Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss. And then the third round got edge rusher DJ Johnson out of Oregon. So, John, this is a Panthers team that we felt like was always like a year or two away, but unfortunately, things have just not panned out for them in certain spots. Nonetheless, what are your thoughts on the new look Panthers now with Bryce Young?
Well, I'm going to start with Frank Reich's hiring. I like Frank Reich. I thought that what happened in Indianapolis was larger than him. I mean, I went through the whole, when we did our episode over the AFC South, I went through the whole Colts schedule, and their season was not as bad as the record makes it out to be, because in the first half of the year, they were hovering around 500 through like almost 8 games, I think. And then there was like a losing stretch towards the end of those 8 games, which is when, he eventually got fired. But there's a real possibility that if he's still there, and health with that team maybe goes their way, that like they could fight back and would have been around a 500 team. Point being, I think that Frank Reich still has some left in the tank when it comes to trying to be a head coach. I liked him when he was in Indianapolis. I just thought he never really had the right quarterback. And for some reason, the Colts were the team that just kept throwing darts at a dartboard, and it never really worked out at the QB position. I was not the biggest Bryce Young fan in terms of most QBs that come out of the draft, like every single year. When you talk about, like, I never thought he was on the level of like a Trevor Lawrence, for example, but I do think that he was a very good quarterback at Alabama. Absolutely a first-round QB. Absolutely going to be a solid starter in the league. And I think that if he can, learn under Frank Reich, I'm really excited to see what this duo can do. I like the additions they got at the receiver room. I think Adam Thielen is a really underrated one just to help out your young quarterback early in his career. Obviously, Adam Thielen at this point in his career isn't what he once was, where he's going to go out there and easily get 1,000 yards every single season and, be a really dynamic weapon for you. But I do think that he can be his safety blanket while you allow the athletic weapons of DJ Chark, Hayden Hurst, Jonathan Mingo, and some of these other guys to just go out there and see what they can do. And then if they don't get open, you should have Adam Thielen. So I like the overall offseason that they had. I don't think they really lost anybody that really stood out to me, and I think that's in large part due to the fact that this Panthers team needed change. I loved Matt Rule, as a Baylor guy. I didn't really love everything that I, heard behind the scenes in terms of the stuff that he tried to pull off for the Panthers that was never allowed because of the owner, that I do think could have maybe changed the fortunes of the team a little bit. But at the same time, I can't say that his firing was unjust. At some point, you lose the locker room, and the media storm against you just becomes too large, that you lose the fan base, and you got to go. And at the same time, they didn't really have success. You and I kind of kept hyping them up as this dark horse team that could maybe surprise people, and they never really did. So I like the Panthers offseason in general. I'm excited for a lot of the young weapons they have. I mean, in the Dynasty League that we just started drafting, I picked up Jonathan Mingo, so I'm really hoping that, he can really pop. But at the same time, I think on the defensive side of the ball, we got a lot of these young options that, you and I have both kind of shouted out in our positional rankings as guys who could jump up into, some of the top fives of their positions eventually at some point, talking about Brian Burns, Derek Brown, some of those guys. So in another year for J.C. Horn, when he was healthy, he had some solid outings. So I don't know. I'm excited for this Panthers team. I certainly think they have a lot of the building blocks. They, just got to keep building, because if Bryce Young works out, that means you have your franchise quarterback, your franchise left tackle, your two studs on the defensive line. J.C. Horn, I wouldn't quite say is a franchise corner yet, but he certainly looked like he has the capability of becoming that. So I don't know. You got a lot of really important positions in terms of building a dominant team moving forward.
Yeah. So in regards to Matt Rule, like you've already alluded to, love the defense. I want to throw out Shaq Thompson out there too. He's always kind of been a guy that kind of been around the top 10 at his position kind of range, but okay, he's either in years or not, but he's at least around that conversation, so still a really good linebacker as well. So, yeah, defense really, in my opinion, hasn't been the major issue. It's been the offense, and specifically the offensive line. And yes, they did, went and got a new quarterback as well. I am concerned about that because the offensive line hasn't looked good as of preseason. I know it's preseason, but like even you mentioned Ekwonu, who had a really good end of last year. He struggled. And once again, it's preseason. Who knows? Maybe, still getting his feet under him. But yeah, my only concern is that line. And one of my concerns with Bryce Young, it was, in most people's word too, was his size. So that's my only thing I'm going to mainly watch out for. And is for the Panthers, is can they just keep him on his feet as much as possible? And even if they can't, because, can't just it's impossible to keep someone completely clean the whole year. Will he be able to withstand and take the abuse of the NFL, taking those hits and such, because he's already, once again, it's preseason, but he's definitely been thrown around a bit, and he struggled in preseason as well. And we've seen, with Zach Wilson, I was comping Zach Wilson because that's a lesson I learned from him is, Zach Wilson was kind of similar in regards to, so his size became an issue in the NFL. His more slender frame, especially when pressure started, the doors start closing in and such. And not sure if he's if I'm sure Bryce can overcome that. Play in Alabama, so he played a lot of big time competition. And granted, did have great talent on his end, but that would be an interesting thing because also I'm trying to think, there's still Chuba Hubbard. They're going to be their main back, I guess.
They signed Miles Sanders.
Miles Sanders, excuse me. Yes. So, hey, maybe Miles Sanders can be the guy. But once again, Miles Sanders is pretty good behind a really, probably one of the best offensive lines, if not, top 2 or 3 in Philadelphia. I'm just not sure that he's going to have much success in Carolina, which is going to end up putting a lot more on Bryce Young in regards to dropping back. So, just an interesting thing to watch. But I am with you. I think Frank Reich, his offenses are usually creative. They do have great tight end utilization. So I can see Hayden Hurst potentially also being, benefiting from this, and I'll be interested to see if DJ Chark can, it's a nice little gamble they're taking with him if he can maybe become the number 1 guy because he's shown flashes of moments of being a playmaking threat, especially deep. But we just I guess teams still got to see it long term and more volume, but.
Well, unfortunately for him, he is currently dealing with an injury in preseason too. So, and
that's kind of been his issue too, Garrett with Jacksonville, injuries and such. So, who knows? But hey, nice little gamble there. And like you said, Adam Thielen, solid receiver who can still pretty much do it all at this point. Not the high level he used to, but still relatively good in regards to other people. So, and yeah, maybe he could pass maybe some of these young receivers like Terrace Marshall Jr. We were high on him, or I was at least coming out. Maybe, and you mentioned Mingo. They can, it may help having a veteran presence, at least, however long Thielen is going to be there to pass on some knowledge and nuances of the game and such. So, yeah, I like what they're doing there. I'm not going to call them a dark horse this year like we did in the past few years as well. But yeah, some encouraging pieces. And hey, I could definitely see 7-10 again, or 6-11 as their end result for this year. But maybe with some optimism, kind of like towards the end of last year, in regards to what you're building. So we'll see how the Panthers fare.